You're listening to the Rogers Sporting Goods Podcast. This is Aaron Jones.
This is Chandler Smith, and I hate long intros, so let's get into it.
And so you've got some mossy oak stuff there, and what I had heard before is that before a full moon, 7 to 10 days before a full moon, you want to hunt those evenings. Coming out of a full moon, you want to hunt 7 to 10 days after a full moon. You want to hunt the mornings. Now, I don't know how much water that holds.
So 7 to 10 days after a full moon would be like last quarter.
Yeah, you want to hunt,
which is the second highest, almost tied for first of daylight deer activity.
Yeah,
so that
mornings,
sounds right. Yeah. So 33.5%, give or take. I don't when this was done, but I'm guessing it's probably still pretty accurate.
Sure.
And then at 33.7% was a new moon. So basically nothing.
Sure. Now, I have also heard...
Which that makes sense to me, too, based off of what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. I've also heard, and I somewhat think there's some merit to it, but when there's a full moon, for instance, people know that deer are running all night. I also think that there's more midday activity when there is a full moon because they've been running all night. Maybe they'll hole up for an hour, take a siesta in the morning and take a siesta in the afternoon, but they run that 10 to 2. Now, I'm of the camp that...
Before they rest again up for the next night's feeding.
Yeah, but I'm of the mentality and of the camp that if I could pick my favorite 4 hours to hunt, 4 big bucks, it would be 10 to 2. I have shot more bucks in that 10 to 2 hour in funnels. Now, not field edges, but in funnels and travel corridors. If you can find a good funnel, a travel corridor, an inside field fence edge, something like that, those bucks are moving during the rut. That first week of November, man, 10 to 2 on a good day, I love that time frame.
And I think I concur with that. So before getting deep into that, from what we've seen and had success with, the least percentage of deer activity was a full moon, which I would have guessed as well. Just what you said, based off of before we get into the 10 to 2, and I think that has a lot to do. One, most of us aren't out there because we take a break. But when you're going in the morning and it's been a full moon, if I've got it doesn't really matter. I pull in, sure enough, it's when I've seen the most deer out in the fields, beans, corn, doesn't matter, which would make sense.
Sure.
Because they're feeding all through the night.
People are seeing the least activity during a full moon, but guess what? They're not hunting that 10 to 2. That's my favorite time to hunt.
Right. So that brings up the next thing is that's a hard one to get around because it's tough.
Oh, yeah.
To get out there, especially if you're, you wake up, you got an hour drive or whatever it is. So you're getting up early, and then you get into your stand, a half hour or so, and you're settled into your spot. And then you sit till 10, and by 10, most people, if they're not successful, they get down and they go eat lunch. And I've seen it. I come back from lunch, and I spook a deer walking out because I try to start walking back in depending, as it gets darker. I try to get in there 2:33, and I don't know how many times walking in I bust out deer. But it's never in the field like you alluded to. Well, it's in the timber. They're moving midday, figuring out what they're doing for their evening.
Well, they know where they're not seen in the middle of the day. That's in the timber and the travel corridors and the funnels and stuff like that. But I love hunting in the middle of the day. Now, it's not fun, but if you can figure out how to stay warm and pack enough food and snacks for an all-day sit, that's the way to go. But the problem is the snacks. Yeah. I usually start eating lunch about 9 o'clock, and then I'm like, I'll save the other half of my lunch for lunchtime, and then by 10:30 I've eaten my whole lunch. That's the problem. So you got to pack a ton of food.
I kind of wanted to save all this this good talk on this stuff to the middle of this podcast. So listeners, you kind of got a casual conversation of Pat and Aaron spitballing October deer hunting and stuff. But Pat and Aaron have been going back and forth about deer hunting. I'm joined. This is Chandler here talking, but we're going to kind of talk about whitetail in October. It's really the goal for this podcast. But before we do, did you guys see the spec on the Dodgers game?
That was sweet.
Yes.
Great pictures.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they took a picture of us. Well, I'd say in the wild. Obviously, it was, but like you were hunting, and then implanted it into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He wanted to see playoff baseball.
Yeah.
Or she.
He or she. That was
Yeah.
pretty funny.
It was great, and then it landed.
Did you see like the live? Like, did you see it
No, I
live?
missed it. I watched bits and pieces of the game. I'd like flip back to it, see what the score was, and then.
You think it was just a confused spec, or do you think it had any type of issues?
Right, to be alone and then, fly down into the stadium. But I think that happens too with fowl of any kind or birds or whatever it is. You kind of see that. They get in there. And I think just being in that, below the lights and everything and a crowd, I think they kind of do get lost.
Get confused. and
Well,
stuff?
sure. Yeah.
Well, one time, I mean, that thing, I think when it landed by third base, it didn't really just graciously land. It took a immediate hold. And that's when that's when the grounds crew got it. But it was right
So
after
it didn't fly back off?
No, they had to they threw a towel over it and throw it in a trash can. Not like in a trash can, like they put it
Okay,
in
just
a trash bucket
Right,
to like
I'm sure
transport it
yeah.
away from the field and probably release it
Yeah.
outside the stadium or something like that.
And where was that? Where was the game being played at? Was it? I guess they're both in Cali, so it wouldn't matter.
Yeah. I forgot which
You're
stadium.
either
I forgot which-
L.A. or you're San Diego.
Yeah, I forgot which stadium it was in.
I'm just thinking of the migration report right now and correlating into that, like
But
this lost spec.
After I saw that, I saw another, I don't know what year it was, but a Canada goose did the same thing. Landed in the field, got confused, and it tried to fly out, and it flew right into like the thin
The
screen.
netting?
No, the thin screens around like above.
For protect the fans from foul balls?
No,
Like the
that
netting?
part?
No, it's like the LED screen that's real thin that goes around like the midsection.
Oh,
And they
sure.
usually have like either
Stats.
stats or
yeah.
promotional. It flew into that.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens
And-
when you see that. Once, if they for some reason dip down below the top of the wherever field it is, I think they get confused because there's so much going on. You gotta, all those people, the lights are so bright, and then I think
Yeah.
everything gets confusing. Like, how do I get out of here?
It looked like it just having a hard time getting the air and the lift to get out because it was trying and it just flew right into the screen. But anyways,
Hanging out.
I derailed us a little bit there.
That was all right. No, it's a good. If you should go if you haven't seen the pictures, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's some great pictures.
I agree. So the focus of today is what?
Yeah.
Hunting late October into the
Yeah,
rut?
we're kind of this pre-rut action really going to be taking off now. Leading up to the rut, maybe some tips, tricks,
Yeah. Starting to see some cooler weather.
everything involved in that, aspect of
I think 90 degrees are gone. We'll
Thank goodness.
knock
the
on wood.
weather's changing
Yes. Thank goodness.
for sure. At least the mornings are cooler.
Yeah.
For sure.
Missouri weather, you wear a hoodie in the morning and then shorts and a t-shirt we get about 70s right now for our high.
Yeah.
You always wear
But it's
shorts,
coming
though.
up, but I always wear shorts, so that doesn't matter. I'll wear a hoodie or t-shirt depending.
Yes. Yeah.
So before we get into the
okay,
game
go ahead.
plan, before we get into the game plan, like kind of what you're talking about, Pat, you've been doing some mock scrape stuff, and
Yeah,
I don't know, how do we want to break this up?
I'm late prepping this year. I mean, typically, well, scrape-wise, that's probably being done. But if we backtracked before that, there's some things that should have been done already that I just didn't have time or slept in late or didn't want to go to the farm that day. But, you basically should have, trail cams are probably already set. Stands are pretty much ready to go. A lot of that stuff, checking stuff. And then, but the first initial, thing you're doing is mock scrapes. And that's getting ready which is part of pre-rut action. So, like I think Stevie was, talking about you telling him about deer movement, and right. So, as we're coming out of it now, but bachelor groups of bucks and then does, and everybody's separated. But we're gonna slowly start coming out of that now. So them bucks are gonna start separating. They're gonna be wandering all over. They're gonna start making scrapes and rub lines and start figuring out their home range, and not necessarily specifically looking for hot does, but they're widening, right? They're breaking off and they're starting that initial prowl of, is anybody available?
Mm-hmm. And I've had several trail camera pictures of little bucks sparring a little bit, just kind of bumping antlers and tickling horns, and they're not going crazy or anything at it. I don't think it's quite to that point, but they're starting to get a little feisty.
And I don't know if I'm foreshadowing what we're going to get into, but can we preface this is the pre-rut, the rut, then you basically have post-rut. And then there's some spikes, right? People talk about a late rut and things, which to me I think is really a continuation of the actual rut. It's just does or fawns that have come into heat late that want to be bred. But the rut, after looking at tons of studies, happens the same time every year.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's warm or it's a cooler fall, like if it gets colder. And I think we see, like bucks, whether they're young or older, they'll kind of start sparring a little bit. We might see a buck with a doe and think, I think they're chasing. They're, I don't know how to say it, but they're not.
Exactly.
The rut happens the same time every year. Scientifically, the studies that have been done for decades.
Yeah, and it's like give or take a day or two, not weeks.
Yeah, it's you're not going to have an early rut. So you're not going to see the rut in Missouri ever happen in October.
True story.
Right. So, but I've seen that like around Halloween, which is a good time to hunt.
Now you might see the seeking phase where the bucks
seeking phase
are
where
going on little walkabouts looking for ladies.
Yeah.
You might see a little chasing the last couple days of October.
Yeah.
But the peak of the rut that people usually associate
with the breeding phase.
That happens the same time every year. That's the breeding phase. You might get deer that are a little bit feistier, searchier, chasier in October, but the peak breeding is always going to happen right around that 12th, 14th, 16th of November.
And it's regardless of temperature. If it's 90 for some reason, then they're just going to do it at night. It's going to be the rut. The activity will just be at the night.
Exactly. So
if for some reason we get a cold spell in October is 50s for the high and 30s for the low, they're not going to start rutting sooner. But basically, so pre-rut's kind of what we're going into right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So the bucks and does, everybody's kind of start mingling out. Does will kind of stay more together, but the bucks will start splitting up. You'll start seeing singles or pairs breaking up. So what you were talking about, my first step is mock scrapes, and there's a ton of ways to do them, right?
What'd you do this year?
Multiple companies have. I've done the bag drippers. So like Wildlife Research makes like, the original nice bag dripper. Tinks has a dripper, but it's more of a plastic bottle. I've seen the crazy IV style drippers. Scrape Fix, which is newer to us at the store that we brought on as a product, they do, so you can make a mock scrape, and then you can get a vine, just a synthetic, like hard, fake-looking vine. Obviously, when we talk about scrapes, there's numerous ways to set it up. The most popular is the overhanging branch on the edge of a field line, which is where you see most of your scrapes.
Sure.
So what I did, go ahead.
I was just saying real quick as you're going into this, if a hunter is not 100% sure what a scrape is, go ahead and explain what a scrape is. Someone might get confused with the rub and a scrape.
So you have a scrapes, then you have, like a lot of people or hunters will allude to a rub line. which you'll see too. So
Yeah,
the
so
difference,
explain rub line
yeah.
and then a scrape line too.
Yeah.
What a scrape
So you're
looks
going to
like
start
and rub.
seeing those now, and they'll become more prevalent the farther into October we get. You're going to see more and more,
So-
which lets you know that pre-rut activity is going on. So a scrape typically is where you have a low overhanging branch on the edge of a field is the most popular spot you see them. And the bucks will go and start pawing at the dirt and licking the overhanging branches and rub their horns on them, our antlers, and
Preorbital glands.
Yeah, and so you get that preorbital gland right on their forehead, which some companies make that scent too, which I've used. And so they're kind of like, hey, this is my spot, right? They'll go to the bath, they'll pee in it, kind of how they mark it, right? They're marking their territory, leaving their scent there. And they might make a few of them.
And it's a signpost, too, to see who's in the area.
Yes.
Because more than one deer will hit it.
Hit it.
Yeah. So you'll get bucks and does that'll all hit it, and they can go through, and I guess they're smart enough, so to speak, that they're like, okay, I recognize all these other smells as deer in the area.
Yeah, and they'll frequent them, right? They might go to it every day for a week or whatever. You know what I mean? They'll hit it often, knowing because other deer are going to come hit that same bare ground, leave their scent, leave their forehead gland, the preorbital scent on the so they'll come back to that. So that's a scrape. You'll notice these on field edges a lot. Most popular. They'll be in the timber too, but for the most part, they're on field edges. Another one that you'll see is the rub line, and you'll see those a lot too on field edges, but one, not just because you're walking there and you see them mostly, but they're in the timber too. And so a rub line, they're not as much pawing at the dirt. This happens when they're rubbing trees, and they're rubbing the bark off, they're rubbing their antlers, and so they're easily seen because you'll be walking, and then all of a sudden,
You see
the
one,
tree, yeah, and
then
they'll
you'll see another
do
one.
yeah. So you call it a rub line. You can kind of follow the line that they're walking.
And you can tell whether they're in the morning or in the evening. Did you know that?
Explain that.
So basically, if you're in a field and you're walking into the timber and you see a rub line as you're leaving the field going into the timber, that deer has made that in the morning going back to bedding, because he's walking from the field going back to the bedding area, and that side of the tree is rubbed. If you're in the timber looking out towards the field, and that's when you see all the rubs, he's making those in the evening as he's coming from bedding to staging to feeding.
So you can kind of see which side of the tree,
and you can
he's
follow
rubbing on.
which direction he's going. So you can kind of get an idea of, okay, he's bedding in this direction, coming through staging here, and feeding here. If you can find it leaving the field, you'll kind of find a direction he likes to go leaving the field. So which side of the tree is on kind of gives you an inclination whether that's a morning or an evening rub.
So let me throw some questions at you. I'll stick with the rub while we're here. Is there anything to show that it's a big deer or small deer? Size of tree, height of the rub?
Height is going to be your number one factor. You're not going to get a lot of little tiny spikes or forks that are rubbing a tree the size of your thigh. But you'll get big bucks that'll just destroy little saplings. They just do
and
that.
so you hear that a lot too. And that's what I was. Yes, typically, big bucks. One, they'll rub anything. So if you see a small sapling, I would tell you that could be any size buck, from a spike
Sure.
to a poping young deer. If you see a big tree, like a telephone pole, like big pine tree or big oak tree that's rubbed, generally speaking, that's a more mature deer.
And then height maybe shows some of the
Exactly.
antler size.
And if it's got gouges in it, obviously it's
Right.
something with some eye guards, some brow tines.
I mean, it's not 100% accurate, but
a camera's the only way that's going to tell
Yeah.
you what's on it.
yeah. But if you see a small tree, don't
With a
automatically
small rub. You might
don't
assume-
automatically think, well, that's a small
Exactly.
buck. That's
Look for
not.
tracks too. Tracks will be a good indicator too.
Yeah, I guess so.
And so with the scrapes and rubs, that's kind of your precursor to let you know that pre-rut is beginning.
Now, do you hunt rubs or scrapes?
Yes. So what there's certain areas, but typically I'll try to set up in the vicinity. Like I was reading, and obviously I knew that to make sure word it correctly. So like a scrape where they're leaving their sign and, peeing in the dirt, and you want to set up downwind. I want to make sure I say it. So deer typically will approach their scrape with the
scent blowing into them.
I want my scent coming away from them.
Correct.
Yeah, so I'll be on the downwind side.
They'll scent check that scrape from the downwind side.
Yes, themselves. So you set up, 20, 30 yards away.
So are you trying to catch them before they get there or after?
Typically, they're making scrapes at night. So I
Yeah.
personally won't hunt a scrape, but I will try and figure out where they're bedding and or where they may be, if I'm hunting a morning, where they might be feeding and get in between it.
Yeah.
But I won't set up over a scrape per se, just because I know that's going to happen at night most of the time. Now, that's not always true, because I've literally hunted a piece of public ground before, and I just happened to see a scrape, and I got nosy, and I was like, man, that smells fresh. And I bumped a buck that was sitting 20 yards away checking it, waiting for other deer.
I've definitely hunted at a field edge and didn't realize. Well, I think I knew, but I had a couple bucks check a scrape. It wasn't very big, but they came up and threw their antlers into the limbs and stuff. But they weren't shooters. But it was definitely evening.
Sure. And they will check them in the daylight. Most of the crazy pawing and scraping is going to be done at night. But
Yeah.
Right.
definitely you can intercept them going to that if you get close enough to their bedding area.
And now if I, like a rub line, if I've got 2 or 3 fairly close to each other, I know that that's an area where deer activity, if you're going after a buck,
They're comfortable
should be
traveling
higher,
too.
and
yeah.
that's where they travel. So, I'll set up in that area.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more, to it. There's other areas, right? Funnels and pinch points and things that go into where I put my set. It's not just solely based off of
the rub line.
the rub line. Another thing too is in the pre-rut is the feeding. As the beans start to change over, deer will transition, and they love the fresh falling acorns. So if you've got a nice patch of those, that's a great place to set up.
They're still in full fill my belly mode because they know
coming up, right? So to finish how I set my mock scrape, what I did this year is I did like a fake mock scrape. I took some code blue scrape mate and soaked it in some frayed style rope, made like a homemade vine, and hung it up. Just trying something new, right? I've tried just about everything, so I think it's more of an experiment than
what do you have
anything,
to lose?
right? I just
Why not?
yeah, and I did it in some areas where I already knew there's been scrapes before. I just set up a new one. You have had people, what about this to you guys is, and some guys say, I don't know why you would do that, but I know a lot of hunters that do it, and apparently deer can't tell, but, they pee in their scrape. Can a human do it? And it's just the same. They're like, oh, someone marked their territory, so I'm going to come there. It doesn't scare them away if a hunter does it.
I wouldn't do it, but I've heard it.
Oh yeah.
I have heard that. I haven't done it, but people talk about it, and I was like, well, I'd just rather buy deer urine and
Is there something
use that.
I think I've heard something about like a master scrape, or like, is there something about like there's like these scrapes, but then there's like the
The main
scrape.
scrape.
That's
primary, and then there's giant community scrapes, and I've only seen a couple of those, but they're ridiculous. They're 6 feet.
yeah. You can
in
tell
a
that by the
circle, or-
size of the
like
pawing and
like
stuff.
the size of your truck hood.
Yeah.
They're just ridiculous, or a little bigger, but like a community scrape, they're ridiculous. And most of the time, they're not on a field edge; they're in the timber. At least the 2 I've seen that I knew were a community
Okay.
scrape full of deer footprints and scrape. But yeah, I've only seen 2.
The new thing now, I say new, probably in the last couple of years, it's really gained popularity, is making a fake rub tree out in a food plot. Just, putting out a fake sapling, something that holds it in, and doing that. And I've seen that be successful.
Sure.
As they see this tree and they just, for some reason, they attract to it.
I wanted to do that this year in one of mine, but ran out of time. But I was basically going to just grab a sapling, dig about a 3-foot hole, drop it in there, and then try and find a branch from a different tree and screw it and wire it onto the tree for like a licking branch and make a scrape and or rub setup. But I ran out of time this year. But I wanted to do that.
That seems to be a good, successful trick.
Oh, I've heard lots of people
That
talk about
isolated tree, kind of out in the middle of the food plot, but it seems to work. There's gadgets out there to help you do it, but you can just
So all these mock scrapes or rubs, their sole purpose is to get bucks in your area or a certain buck to check it, to be in that area more, to get them on a routine. Is that what that is?
Okay, so that's a good, as we talked about that. So when you make scrapes, one thing that it does is it helps, if you're doing a dripper, is it helps with daylight activity. So a dripper functions during daylight and then will slowly stop dripping as it goes overnight. Doesn't matter how cold or hot it is, but as the sun rises, typically the temperature will go up some, and so the pressure of that day and everything combined, it'll drip during the day, which should help bucks frequent it more during daylight hours than overnight. So you do all these things to help you be successful, and I'm all for trying all of them just to see. And so you've got your mock scrapes you've done. You're checking your rub lines.
When do you start the mock scrapes?
Yeah, so now.
Mid-October.
Anytime.
Mid-October.
Yeah, mid-October
I've
for
heard
me.
guys saying they start them early.
Yeah, I've seen some guys, they'll do it starting in October. I mean, if you're checking cameras and doing sets and you see fresh scrapes or mocks, I think you're good to go.
Do it.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Same with scent. As we get into that, when we get to it, I'll bring up something. But so mock scrapes, all that's done. I'm set. We've checked stands, and now the next thing, right, is the tactics of the actual hunt itself and what takes place.
So it's decently chilly now in October. What days are you picking to go hunt and what times?
Always hunting the fronts, because October is a very bipolar month. I mean, you can start the month at 90 degrees and finish the month at 40 degrees. You never know. So I personally, you're going to read a lot of stuff on the internet or see a lot of stuff that, you need to hunt this moon phase or you need to hunt this day or that day. But most people don't have the luxury of hunting any day they want, or their schedule doesn't align with those days. So that's always something to consider. The best time to hunt is when you can. That being said, obviously there's things that, a moon phase may help, or I still think fronts are the biggest kicker.
There's things that are going to help you up your chances.
Exactly.
If you can only hunt whenever, then obviously hunt when you can. But things that can help you. So moon phase, you talked about cold fronts, or any type of front really.
Well, fronts kind of do with pressure, right?
Yeah. What correlates with that is the barometric pressure.
Exactly.
You hear like Jury Outdoors, they talk about it a lot, right? So, but one thing that they've helped people is that pressure, and I think if I remember correctly, right around the 32 mark, like if the pressure's 32, it doesn't matter if it's 80 or not. That's a great day to be out there with that pressure. That high pressure is a good day to get out there.
Yeah.
If all else fails, and it's a great pressure, get out there.
In bass fishing, we talk about pressure rising and falling and what that does. And then for deer hunting, is it the same? Is it about the falling or rising, or is it about that certain degree or the certain measurement? I don't know.
Yeah,
Because it's a little bit of both. You get a lot of people that are like, okay, between 29.6 and 31, that's the best time to deer hunt. But again, I still think that fronts, man. That pressure change when a
like
front's
we just
coming
had
in.
a cold front the other day when it was like
When it
32.
it goes from 80 to 50. It's Thursday's 82 and the high Friday's 57. You need to be hunting that front. But again, a lot of people say like a good rising pressure too, but I've seen deer activity just diminish when it's rising pressure. Well, I guess it's been later in the season when I've seen that. It goes from 21 degrees to 33 degrees, and activity from the day before was absolutely diminished, but there was a rising pressure to create that event. So I always like the falling pressures in the fronts. That's when I'm itching. That's when I'm really struggling to not be out there.
Right now we have a falling pressure. I just added it to my watch.
Oh, okay, perfect.
They say like they seem to move best, whitetails do, when the pressure's between 29.9 and 30.3.
Okay.
So there you go. And the best would be at that higher end. I know it doesn't seem like there's a lot of wiggle room there, but the higher end of that 30.3.
Sure.
So and I know people, they hunt those as well. For me, I've been on the opposite end where if I'm available to get out there because I don't have as much time, I'll go. My chances are more successful. I just, I got to be out there. But yeah, same with like waterfowl, right? You hunt the fronts and, just gets deer activity. If there's a big cold snap and it goes them cold fronts, same as us, right? They want to warm themselves up and, they move more.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So from that going into moon phase, it's kind of what you guys started you were talking back and forth about. And Aaron, you were saying just, right into a full moon and after a full moon is like key. You're saying evenings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so going back to that, basically when you are before a full moon, so if your full moon is on the 20th of the month, basically those 7 to 10 days ahead of that full moon, you want to target the evenings. If your full moon's on the 20th, say the 20th to the 28th, 29th, you want to target mornings. So before the full moon, you want to focus on evenings, and after the full moon, focus on mornings. I think there's some merit to that, but
and is that because they're feeding overnight in a full moon, so they're coming back to their bedding area? So the setup then would be figure out where the bedding area is, if you can, and hunt between the bedding area and where they're coming off their feed from the full moon.
Sure.
Because they're feeding overnight, typically, you're going to catch them coming to bed in the morning.
Well, sure. And whitetail, they're a crepuscular creature, so that means they're most active at dusk and dawn. That's what crepuscular means. So if you can time the rising and setting of the moon, especially the rising of the moon with the dusk and dawn, I think that's an even better opportunity. Again, if everybody has a perfectly free schedule to hunt whenever they want, sure, you just look at these things and you're like, okay, I'm going to hunt this, and this.
Right.
But that doesn't work. But if you can get to where, you go out right now and it's sunsets at, I don't know, what 6:40 or something like that. Chandler, pull that up on your watch. It's later than that. Maybe
they call that
7.
Right.
6:44 p.m.
Okay, I was close. So anyway, yeah, if you can get that moon and it's rising at 6 in the evening and it's straight overhead at 6 in the evening, man, that's bingo. So when it's right overhead, if it's go time, like last light, if it's right overhead, first light, I have seen a lot of merit to that where there's a lot of deer moving out in the fields, running across roads. They're doing a lot of stuff when that moon's straight overhead right at dusk and dawn.
And that's, going back to your point of 10 to 2, seeing action. Typically, though, that's in the timber.
Correct.
Which is another reason why midday, there's a couple factors. One, we're not out there, so we don't see the activity. And two, if you are driving around, it's typically in the timber, so you don't see deer either out in the fields, which is why most people are successful in the mornings and evenings. But
Correct.
part of that, too, is that's when they're out there hunting. But that's also when they're more in the open.
Yep.
And they're moving between their feeding and bedding
Yeah.
in the morning and evening.
Exactly. And ironically enough, the reason I got so hooked on hunting that 10 to 2 time frame is I really got in a spot where to get back to the timber where I wanted to hunt, you were blowing deer out of the field trying to walk in the morning. And then if you sat in the timber until dark, you'd try to leave that stand set up and you'd blow deer out of the field. So I was spooking deer in and out constantly. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I either got to go to the stand at 3 in the morning and sit till 9 at night, or I just wait and go in at like 8:30, 9 o'clock and then leave at like 4. And so that's what I started doing. And I'd get back there, and there was a good inside field edge. There was a funnel. There was a creek. And, man, I would see deer all day from starting about 9:30 till about 3:30 in the afternoon, just nonstop deer activity. And then it would kind of wane. And then that's when I'd sneak out, and I'd never spook a deer. I'd never spook a deer going in about 8:15, 8:30 either. So it wasn't by chance that I fell in love with that 10 to 2 time frame. It was I had to, or else I was blowing deer out of a field regardless. But, man, if you can find a good funnel.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said. You were taking mental notes about this spot you're talking about, but jotting it down on your phone, like what you're seeing, taking mental notes throughout the seasons so you can look at that. Those are great tools to use to change your setup from year to year. Or, right, what was activity today? Okay, October 27th, it was this cold. There's things that, you write it down and you start comparing these and you'll see that, right, just another tool to up your chances. And like you're talking about, hunting that spot over and over, you're like, gosh, I keep blowing the deer out. Then you realize, well, I'm going to try this. You're more successful. So it's that in-season scouting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not just everything set up. You've done your trail cameras and then you just go hunt and whatever happens, happens. But, don't be afraid to make changes in season.
Have I told you about that? I don't know if I was talked about on this podcast where hunting North Missouri, I think we were going out, I don't know, it was midday. Maybe it was 10 o'clock, maybe it was noon, I don't know. But it was like the one random day I didn't walk in with my release on my hand or on my wrist. Bow hunting. This is right before the rut. Right before the rut, right before Missouri's rifle season. Like the weekend before or something like that. And just start walking in the timber. It was midday. I think we hunted that morning or something like that. I don't know. It was kind of chilly, and I basically about ran in the way of a nice 135, 140 buck. It looked big from the ground, but I don't know. I tend to shoot low, and about run into it, and it was chasing a doe like right in front of me, and I dropped to a knee in the trail, grabbed my bow, put an arrow on, and then I realized I don't have my release. Well, I did. It was just in the backpack, and at this point, he's probably 20-something yards to my right. Didn't care that. I mean, I'm sure they both saw me, but they did not care I was there, and I was fumbling, trying to figure out which pocket the release is in. I found it, put it on, got my bow, started to kind of, I don't know what I was doing, just chase off in that direction. And by the time I got around the corner of like this cedar or this evergreen, they were nowhere to be found because they were moving. But the amount of time of me like on my knees fumbling for my release, if I had the release, I could have had 2 or 3 shots.
Yeah.
Craziest thing I've ever had happen. It wasn't the extent where I could have got a shot at a deer, but a buddy and I were hunting this property that I was just talking about that was tough to get into, but we walked in early one morning. I mean, we were a little crazy, like 4:30. We got after it, but he was about, I'd say 10 yards in front of me, and I had stopped to get a drink or something, so I was about 10 yards behind him. We had a doe run between us. We both had our headlamps on. We had a doe run between us, and I was like, good grief. We stopped and kind of laughed, and pretty soon we hear something running through the timber, and the buck was chasing the doe and ran right between us too, and I had my green headlamp on, and I was like, holy crap, and I stopped, and the buck turns around and looks at it, and I got my light on him. I mean, it's probably 135, 140, but yeah, we were 10 yards apart, and the deer ran right between us.
Jeez.
Yeah. They get crazy, man.
Yeah.
So you're talking about walking in. I do walk in with my release on.
Yeah. I normally do. I don't know
Now.
what it was that day.
because I've had it. I mean, I've never taken one, but I've had chances where if I just had a few more seconds, but just in case, I don't want to be caught with no release and my target deer or one that I want to take is standing right there and he's not moving, and all I got to do is knock an arrow.
My reason for wearing a release is not for deer, but for turkey. During turkey season, you can't get within a quarter mile of a turkey on foot. During deer season, I trip over and walk into my stand. I don't understand it. It's like...
So you want to be ready to go.
For a turkey, yeah. Because, you can... Well, Missouri, you buy your bow tags, you get turkey tags too.
Yeah.
But I've had more opportunity at turkey than deer walking in and out.
Right.
Hey, that might be a good opportunity this year to get some turkey for Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Yeah. Get a wild one because I supposedly... store-bought, turkey for Thanksgiving is through the roof. People are going to
have to get you one for the table.
People are going to be having ham for Thanksgiving this year. They had to knock out a couple of million in population for harvest or something for this fall.
Yeah, when aren't we trying to deal with the food shortage?
Get a wild turkey for you for the table.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Get a deep fried turkey.
Mm-hmm. I could do it.
One thing I brought up was the scent thing I wanted to touch on, and I get asked at the store, hey, what would you use? And there's a lot of companies. I just want to, so during the pre-rut, like doe urine, normal buck urine, basically all season. But estrus, right? Just use it during the rut.
The peak of the rut.
Yeah.
Depending on your area. We keep saying mid-November. That's here for the Midwest.
Right, that's for, in Missouri here. Obviously that changes, depending on what state you're in and stuff. But, right, it's unnatural. You don't want to put out an unnatural, right? If you put out estrus in mid-October, that's not natural.
Yeah, one of the cool things about Rogers, too, is in the store, at least at this point right now, because deer scents are not sold online because they break open in UPS shipping, and
they beat the tar out of some of these.
And
things.
you get a package that smells like buck piss.
Yeah,
at your doorstep.
Right,
dog's going crazy. But anyways, going in the store, you get to see 5, 6, 7, 8 brands that are all, and then we carry all of the options. I've done scrapes from Code Blue that I have orbital gland scent. In a bottle that I'm rubbing on the limbs. Then I got dominant buck urine and Code Blue or something that's put on the ground.
Right, there's...
Or whatever.
Yeah, and then you got synthetic versus,
We carry it all.
I was about to say fresh squeezed.
You can say
it. But fresh collected from a farm.
Yeah.
Some states don't allow that now.
Collected?
Yeah.
So it's got to be synthetic.
Yeah, which is a little ridiculous. I've read some articles online, so I'm an expert. That qualifies me as an expert because I spent 30 seconds Googling, right?
Uh-huh.
But supposedly, the deer has to drink like 1.5 gallons of natural urine in order to get CWD from urine. Like the amount that a deer has to consume to get CWD from an infected deer urine is through the roof. It's totally unnatural, not realistic. But you've got states that have outlawed the natural urine. I personally don't care what you use, synthetic, natural, whatever. I don't use a lot of it anyway, just because I think over the last several years, it's so heavily used that deer pick up on it. They're not dumb. They're like, man, I smell XYZ scent every field I go into this year. That's not normal. I don't know. I also think, too, that if you think about it like, oh, I'm going to put some doe estrus out, I'm going to hang some on a wick. Well, that doe estrus is from when she pisses in a scrape. She doesn't just put out a little 1/4 ounce, man. She's dumping out about, I don't know how many ounces. So I think if you really want to get that deer's attention, you got to put, 8 ounces out there probably? That's what she's pissing, not just a little 1/2 ounce bottle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I'm pretty sure I've
how
had deer.
I can make this bigger. This is perfect. What you just said.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings on that. I feel like yes, I've had deer sniff wicks before, little bucks and does and stuff. But I've also think I've seen deer come into a field, get downwind, and blow. and it's not me because I'm 60 yards away during rifle season. So I know they're not smelling me because I'm still downwind yet, but they smell that wick and they blow. So I'm on the fence about that, but I don't know. Synthetic, natural, whatever. I just had to throw that in there. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I could have swore when I read it, it was a deer had to consume like 1.5 gallons of.
Oh yeah,
urine
but
to
you
get
are
sick.
right on. There's states where natural urines are banned.
Yes.
So there's 4 different classifications. So there's yellow states are where all natural urine-based scents are banned. So like we carry Mist OP or Flawless. Those are natural.
Sure.
Actually, Code Blue.
Their more expensive line has 1 deer, 1 bottle kind of thing.
1 deer,
fresh.
1 bottle.
They also have
But
synthetic.
those are natural. So you got to check whether it's
Yeah.
synthetic. It'll say synthetic
You
on it.
usually find that in a fridge if it's like the good stuff.
Sometimes,
Yes.
yeah. But if it's not, it should say synthetic. So those states, a few of these have always been that way, even before CWD was a big deal, and some are more recent. So to name off a few, one in the Midwest, Arkansas, if you consider that Midwest.
I didn't know them. I thought it was more like
But
Eastern.
basically, everybody in the Midwest, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, those are all, you're good. You can use whatever you want. So, but the yellow states, you've got Arkansas, Alaska, Nevada,
Oh, so it's west.
Oregon,
Idaho,
New Mexico,
New
Arizona.
Mexico, Arizona, mostly the west states.
Yeah.
A few, is that Vermont?
It looks like Vermont.
I was
Rhode
trying to make it
Island,
big. Yeah.
South Carolina, Virginia.
Right.
So those are the ones I remember. I didn't know about the out west states.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's where Colorado is where they
Yeah, but Colorado is, everything's okay.
a lot of that CWD is pretty.
Yeah. Dark blue do not have statewide urine-based scent bans or restrictions. Besides, there's a couple where they restrict use in the CWD management zones.
Okay.
Like I remember Missouri had that for even just normal mineral.
Yeah.
Like not just baiting with corn or anything like
But
that or
just salt.
whatever. But yeah, you couldn't even put out a block of salt during our peak. I mean, it was a few years back, and it might be changed now. I'd have to look at this year's book. Then you have medium blue states. They ban urine-based scents unless they are products that qualify for the ATA RHSA Deer Protection Program.
Those are facilities that have to go through a rigorous screening process
Right.
to prove that they don't have CWD.
So medium blue, there's a pocket of them. Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee. There's a pocket of them there.
Montana, Michigan.
Montana, yep. And then you've got your light blue and gray, which there's only one. It's Louisiana. Louisiana banned urine-based scents except for products that meet the Deer Protection Program standards, like the medium blue states above, and also RT QULC tested to confirm no CWD prions are present.
Jeez.
So there you go. If you're in
All right.
Missouri, you're okay. Basically, the Midwest, you're okay, except Arkansas.
Yeah.
You'd have to use synthetic. Now, I have used both. It's really hard to tell. People ask me this too. Do you see a difference when you use? Well, there's variables too, right? Same with rattling. I think there's twice I can truly say that when I rattled, I knew that buck came because I rattled. But I've rattled other times, and then a deer came a half hour later. Now, they can't hear long way. Sometimes they just meander to you, but same with scent. I don't, I do use some of it as more of a cover scent, and it kind of, I don't know if there's a better or worse, but I use them. I just use it more as an advantage.
Real quick before we go into the rattling, Evercalm, like the deer
Yeah.
herd scent,
Evercalm, the Mama Doe by Heatwave, and then Code Blue makes a stick style version like Evercalm.
I feel like I've personally seen that stuff act as calming aid. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they were just calm to begin
like
with.
a deer dander, calming.
I mean,
Smells like a bedding area.
It literally smells like a wet deer.
yeah, yeah, it does. And I've literally had a small buck just come lay under the tree I rubbed Evercalm on.
I've had
That was
people
like 10
say
years.
that.
That was 10 years ago, and he went into that area, and the tree I rubbed it on, or one of the trees, usually 3 or 4, he just came in and just laid right under it, and I stared at him for about 4 hours.
And then you were sold on Evercalm.
Yeah, I mean, maybe,
And then
I don't know.
bought us out.
Yes. No, I think there's merit to that stuff too, to some extent, because I'll hunt ground blinds and I'll rub it around the 2 little windows I might have open, and
Yeah.
I don't seem to see deer walk by and flip out, even if they're downwind of me. Now they'll stop and kind of peek in the blind, and they'll get cautious, but they don't flip out. But I've got that right around all the window edges and pretty heavily, so if there's any wind coming from the blind, it's got that on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You even got like the cover scent stuff like nose jammer and things like that. And there's people that swear by it. I mean, they will buy us out, and I'll sell out, and people will be like, "You don't have any more? I need it." But they just nose jammer, those kind of different. It's supposed to, what the studies have shown, they're olfactory. Yeah. It just kind of jams it. It just
kind of maxed out. Like they just can't take any more.
And so they're I mean, it smells. It's like a vanilla smell.
I love the smell.
Right.
I like nose jammer for
like
me.
a fart can spray. But it just So I don't know. So that's there's tons of scents. I mean, if you want to use them, by all means, just make sure it's the right. Doe and buck urine, great to use. Don't do a rutting buck scent. Like Evercalm makes rutting buck. I think there's a few other like dominant buck style scents. Don't use those really until you get to the peak of the rut. Same with estrus. But just regular doe urine, the calming scent, and then just everyday doe urine, no problem.
How many buck bombs do we sell?
Oh my gosh! Remember those
doe and estrus?
Buck. Even I'd buy a pile. I'd go out there and I'd hunt an open cornfield. It looked like I was fogging for bugs.
Yeah.
That stuff. Just got to make sure the wind's in the right direction.
Yes.
You don't want to pop that down and be downwind.
Oh, boy.
We still have
would
them.
Sell thousands of those. Thousands. And just
For
know
sure.
that I just picture like a bunch of guys in the tree stand, like hitting the button and chucking it,
Right. It's just like a grenade. They're just popping it.
Smoke grenade.
It is. Those are great more for, the open field. I think it's if you're going to use a scent, you put it out 10, 15 yards away, depress it, and just let it douse
Permeate,
everything.
Downwind.
Could get somebody interested.
That is one thing that I'll do when I do use scents. I'll even carry a spray style bottle like golden estrus from Wildlife Research during the rut. And even when I climb up, I'll have it ready, or some sort of spray style scent. And every half hour, 45 minutes, just a couple sprays, just to kind of and those molecules, because it's a spray, it's no mess. We've all been there. You get some on your hand, then you forget, and you wipe your eyes or
Your nose, and then it's in your nose. You pick your nose.
eat a snack, and then
trying
go to
to
lick
eat
your finger.
Your awesome made sandwich, and then you're just
You're like, oh,
you're just smelling.
jeez. But I'll do a couple sprays just to refresh in the area, and then molecules, they travel so far. But
Yeah.
I know it's 20 feet in the air, but
Yeah.
anyways. So next to that, now we're like, if we're in the pre-rut, we know what's going on. Like tactics to use that could help you. So let's talk about rattling, no rattling, calling, decoy use, things like that. What's your opinion? What have you used or don't use?
I've
Exactly.
not had much luck with decoys.
Yeah.
I've only used them a couple times.
At any time or just in general?
In general.
Yeah.
I've seen one deer freak out and Then the other time I saw some deer come to the field edge, and then they just turn around and walk back in.
Gotcha.
So I don't know that it didn't work. I know that I had them out in a field so that deer could see them ahead of time. I tried to be pretty thoughtful about how I was handling it so I didn't get my scent all over it. I know you're not supposed to use them in a heavily timbered area so that it freaks deer out. They just come around a corner or something, and then there it is. But I've not had much luck with that. Rattling, I think if it's October, you can tickle the antlers and maybe you'll get some curiosity. I don't think you want to go for a knockdown drag out in early October. That's not natural either. But like you said, I've rattled a few times where I know it brought deer in because they kind of came at a fast walk.
I was going to say, was it quick reaction to you rattling?
I mean, just a couple minutes. So,
okay.
And it came in at a pretty good little clip. Now, all the bucks I've ever rattled in have probably been 2 or under. Maybe 1 3-year-old. I've never rattled in a big, solid, mature buck. I think that's just the curiosity factor of some of those younger bucks. I'm not opposed to it. I definitely like to use natural antlers as opposed to some of the other products out there. I just think it gives the best sound. That being said,
hence the more natural.
Yeah.
Again,
watch your fingers on natural antlers.
Well, oof.
Make sure you
I've seen some
take the time.
thumbnails removed.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And then you've got, grunts or snort wheeze. I can only say on one occasion I know a snort wheeze changed the direction of a deer walking along a creek edge to where it came back up towards me.
And then
Really?
any doe?
Yeah.
Any doe calling? Have you ever?
The bleats, like the
And
cans
I'm more
and
in the
stuff.
pre-rut stage here because the calling does change throughout
Sure.
the seasons. But
I mean, I've tried the can before. I've never noticed any crazy effect. That's me personally. I know some people will swear by it. Grunts, yeah. A lot of times I'll use grunts if I'm going into an area or leaving an area where I know there's already deer, just so as they not necessarily see me or smell me, but can hear me exiting or leaving a stand. Like if I've got to walk by a field, I'll do some soft little grunts as I'm leaving, just because one, I know they can't see me, but they might be able to hear me, and or I know they can't smell me, but they might sort of be able to see me and or hear me. Just to, they hear some soft little grunts and they hear the leaves shuffling. Maybe it just doesn't blow them out of the field. But I don't know. Mixed emotions on all of it. I haven't been able to talk to a deer and ask them what they think. But
I have.
Okay.
So I would go. So we'll start with rattling. Like you, pre-rut, I don't rattle as loud. I will bring some. I used to use natural antlers. I do use the black rack. I've used other ones. The black rack for me seems to be the most realistic if you're not going to use natural antlers. I do like them because they're packable. They'll stack. They've got the double sided, so you get a lot more noise out of them. But I'll tinkle, right?
Yeah.
With them, make some sound.
Yeah.
But as I get into, I know it's once a podcast.
Yes.
It's okay. But I'll messle. I've lost it. It happens, people.
It's okay.
That's what I'm here for.
Comic Relief
Exactly.
by Pat Fisher.
And it's free.
It is.
No admission.
We don't charge.
Right. But I'll just light rattling. There has 2 times I've known it to work. One, and they both were quick reactions. One, I didn't see the deer coming. I rattled. A small buck came by within about 5 minutes, walked on. I'm like, okay, that worked. But try it again after he left and was out of range. I rattled again, and before I could put him down, this 3.5, maybe 4-year-old, boom, was underneath my tree. Full run and stopped. I'm like, well, shoot. I still have him in my hand. I did get that deer. And then the second time was like we're in a text group and the wife and everybody's like, yeah, there's a buck, it's coming your way, blah, blah, blah. And I'm on one side of the farm and then there's a road and then the other side. So where I'm at, I pull up my binos and sure enough, I see the buck running across the field and it has to come to the road and it stops and then it's got to cross over to my side. but I'm like 50 yards down the road from where it's standing to cross. I'm like, it's going to cross in the wrong area. So I pull on my antlers and rattle, and he turned and walked right down the gravel road and then right into where I was. So
Nice.
those are the 2 times that it worked. But other than that, I don't know. I couldn't tell you 100%.
Yeah, because
I
I
try
rattled,
to-
it's 30 minutes later, and you're like, I mean, did it just take
And
its
it could,
time, or did
yeah.
it just stumble that direction anyway?
Right. When I do rattling sequences, I will vary it. Sometimes I'll do it 30 seconds, or sometimes I'll rattle for 2 minutes long, especially if I'm getting into more of the rut stage where they're battling for dominance and they're doing a long fight. I'll match that. But pre-rut, light rattling. Calling, I don't do I'll do doe bleats every now and again, especially if I spook deer out. If I walk into a stand and get up and because I'm going in midday for an evening hunt and I spook them out, I'll put out a fawn ball and a couple doe bleats just to maybe entice them. Okay, hey, you left your kid back here, or the mom's looking for everybody to try to get them to come back to you. And then I'll grunt every now and again. And then decoys. I've had one time where a small spike came out. I was doing the flambeau boss buck.
Yeah. Oh. So
And he walked around it, and I put scent around it, not directly on the decoy, right? Because then it stinks when you got to pack it up. Kind of made a perimeter around it, some tarsal gland scent, something like that. And he walked around it for about 45 minutes and left. But I feel like half time I use a decoy. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. I need a decoy expert.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they scare off.
Yep.
Yeah.
They see it. They won't come to it. I've used small ones. I've used the bigger buck decoys, and I just can't. I don't know if I'm got them positioned wrong or what. I always try to face them quartering away from me is the best from what I've seen. That way, if the deer does approach, you're getting a good shot on the deer. But yeah, decoys, and it's more to carry.
Yeah.
So, like you said in the timber, I think you probably shouldn't use them there as much. I have tried it, a doe, during the rut, just to see what would happen. Didn't help. But they should be more in a field, open, where they can be seen.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. To each his own. I've seen them work and not work.
When you see the videos online of the the decoys working, it's pretty cool to see. I mean, I've seen some decoys destroyed from a dominant buck or a buck that wants to fight and just squares up, back of the neck, bowls up, hair standing straight up and runs that thing over. It's pretty cool to see.
And I don't think what a lot of people realize is what you see online. For every time a buck comes into a decoy, there's probably 8 that they don't.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the one positive interaction as opposed to the other ones where they didn't. So you got to take it with a grain of salt.
So
Right.
rattling for me, I've definitely seen it work. I've seen it work to where you're still mid rattle and the buck, and it's never really a big buck at these scenarios, is flying in, coming to check it out, and you just sit still because you're moving your hands and whatnot. That's happened multiple times for me, but the one time I actually rattled in a shooter, and I would say I didn't rattle in. It was back in the days when I was filming deer hunts. So we had 2 guys in a tree, and we were off of a scrape line next to a food plot. We were back in the woods. We were kind of in a travel area. It was in the evening, and we decided we threw the kitchen sink. He was going to rattle, and I broke this branch off of the tree that we were in, like a small one, and had a bunch of leaves on it. And as he started rattling, I was just banging the leaves like crazy, and it sounded so realistic to an actual fight in the woods because it sounded like you can hear the hoof beats and the leaves and everything, and it's super loud, but it sounded amazing. And then we weren't even done with that first, 30 second, 45 minute second, deal we went into, and immediately to our left down this, opening, there's a shooter buck that just hopped up out of a ditch out of nowhere. And The only downfall is it caught us doing the whole brass band thing up in the tree. But it had to come in and see what that was. But the fact that I was swinging a branch around and we were rattling and moving and stuff and going crazy, I think if he would have not seen us, he would have been under our tree in probably a minute or less.
Yeah.
But he was about 50 yards away from us whenever he popped his head up, or like we actually got to see him. And we just got caught making a ruckus in a tree. But it sounded so cool, and it was definitely a shooter, and we got caught with our pants down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if all else fails, less is more probably on all of it.
Yeah.
As long as a little bit of scent control, wind, and just being in the right area from either scouting or the sign or whatever. And, if you don't use any urine, no calling, no deer decoys.
Yeah.
That's right.
Recreate their natural environment on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah.
You're not altering it in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
That's kind of the mentality I've taken over the last several years. It's not that I'm saying all that stuff doesn't have
and
place.
I have seen it work.
Absolutely.
But an all natural every day, like you said.
I'm trying to get in and out without that deer ever knowing that anything ever took place.
Yep. I'm with you.
So that's where I'm kind of at these days.
Yeah. Yep.
But I don't know.
Bunch of leftover wicks hanging up in trees with scent all over.
Yes. Which I think is why a lot of deer, in my opinion, shy away from some of these scents, because a lot of times guys will just hang the wicks up and leave them. And then they're there.
And I've been there.
Yeah.
I hung it up and then it's night or whatever. Someone got one or I got one or.
Exactly.
You're like, I'm ready to get out of here. And you didn't grab it, zip it back up. Then it just stayed there. And,
sure.
Yeah. But I'm with you.
It is what it is.
Pre-rut is upon us.
I got a question.
I'm excited. So
Just a random question. The powder acorn vapple stuff.
Oh yeah.
You consider that baiting? Is there,
well,
is there
that's-
an argument there?
That certain states would. I mean, whether I do or not isn't.
It was almost like a wind checker,
It's a wind checker bottle,
Yep.
and they said it has acorn scent,
It is
But-
acorn scent.
but really it's like acorn dust from like post processing of something,
Right. But it's fine enough that
It's
you use it as a
powder.
wind checker.
and it smells so good.
It does. I still have an old bottle.
Yeah,
I never used it all.
I don't know. I
but
just always thought about like, is this like on the fine line of?
I probably should have looked. I used it.
It smells so good.
Well, there's some states that say you're not supposed to use any attracting scents. Well, that's technically a scent and it's an attractant, but
Yeah.
that,
It's
I think they
food
mean
base. I mean, obviously deer lures are,
Yeah.
a lure.
Well,
They're attracting.
that's a good question. Foreshadowing for a guest we're going to have on.
for next podcast.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. I just always thought like, okay, it's not acorn scented powder. Like you open it up
And you're not
there's-
pouring a pile of it on the ground.
No, you're not. But you open it up and it's like powdered.
And that
remnants
is
of
something too.
acorns.
You bring up a good point. Talking about that, we talked about, the scent. We obviously looked at what urine is banned in some states. Wherever you're listening from, double check every single year
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah.
change it.
what the rules are and regulations before you just go use whatever. Right? You got to take it upon yourself to do the research. And if you can't find the pamphlet or, right, they have the actual code book that you can read, you can call your local office and ask the question.
Is there any states left that don't allow lighted knocks?
I'm thinking there might be one or two. I know just in the last couple years, some of the ones out west finally got on board, realizing that it doesn't help you kill an animal. It only helps you recover it and or your arrow so you can make an educated decision on whether you need to go after it right then and there or not. I always thought that was a little ridiculous.
I was
that-
always confused on why it was illegal to use lighted knocks unless they were just grouping it into like lighted electronic
which they
anything.
were.
one state? Idaho.
They
Did
still
that
are.
not just get changed
I
though?
thought
Well,
they did.
okay, maybe they changed it. Does it? Let me see when it says this was put up.
I swore
I
I,
thought
saw
they
Oh,
it.
this
did.
is old. Okay.
I thought
They were the last state.
they
Then.
were the last day, so
Okay.
it's all good.
Currently
thinking-
does not accept.
I was thinking it was either Alaska, Idaho, Hawaii, something like that.
But that was
Did
2017.
that rule
so.
have to deal with lighted pins? Or never?
There's still states, I think Missouri included. You can't. Well, I don't know. Can you use a lighted? No, you can use lighted pins. You can't use anything that projects light onto an animal.
Yeah,
I think there still might be states that you can't use lighted pins.
that might be true too. Which is
Double
weird.
check.
I mean, obviously, you don't want to promote hunting in the after shooting light hours.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But
and this was 2019. So did it change since then?
Idaho,
Yes. Yeah, I want to say it's been in the last year.
Okay,
Last
because
year.
lighted knocks remained illegal for archery hunters in 2019. All right.
I don't know.
was
Just
yeah,
to that, check all the rules and
for
stuff.
sure. Yeah. I mean, they do. Trail cams have become a thing now.
Oh yeah, was that Arizona?
There was some
Arizona,
I
you
think
can't use trail
Arizona,
cam.
maybe Utah.
Period.
Oh, not even on private ground?
I looked that up.
Yeah.
You got that Arizona trail cam law? It might just be public, but at the same time, I heard that I don't know. They're hiding Bigfoot or something.
I want to see. Okay. All right. This was March 7th. So this is this year, spring. We'll see what it says. Some western states have made a big change around the use of wireless cameras. I wonder if that's a difference too, with the wireless
It might
versus.
have been.
Earlier this year, Utah joined Arizona and Nevada in banning the use of trail cameras for hunting. Montana prohibits the use of cellular cams during hunting season. Reasons for camera bans.
So what are the first three states again? Arizona, Utah, and
Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and then Montana prohibits the use of cellular cams
During the season.
during the season.
during not,
Right.
but before season, all four of those states you can use cameras.
No.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
just
think you can-
Montana.
That's just Montana. It says the western bans, it's not about whitetails, but elk and mule deer. Wildlife officials point to chaotic scenes of hunters and outfitters hanging 30 to 50 or more cams on a single water hole as they scout for bulls on public land. And so that's talking about public
Public.
land.
Sure.
It might just be public.
So I mean, I do understand that to a point, right? It's public parks. You try to keep them nice. And then pretty soon, if that's true, that's what wildlife officials are saying,
You got a paparazzi.
is
out
you've
there.
got 50 trail cameras hanging up. I mean, I understand that. That's a little crazy. But
You imagine cellular cameras in the elk migration, or just that advantage of being like, boys, they're here. I guarantee they're going to be down this way.
and then you
and like
and
by
then
tomorrow.
you come across the stealing part, right? You got 30 or 50 you right? It happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so now they're dealing with not only, right, all these cameras on one spot, but now they're dealing with the legality side of people making reports and people getting in fights. And but that's public. I mean, I couldn't see it being banned private. I don't know how you could.
Yeah, I don't know how.
But you could, there again, you can call and ask. So, all sorts of stuff. But, anyways, I digress.
Anything
Let's
else
go
you wanna-
hunt.
Yeah, that's what I'm ready to do.
And everybody wear a harness,
Yes.
Everybody wear a harness.
please.
Use a lifeline, wear a harness.
Yep.
I'm ready to get out on an evening hunt with the kayak and the
Mm-hmm.
bow.
I might try and sneak out this coming weekend.
Okay.
Hunt one evening.
Up at your place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been putting it off. I'm waiting till that later October this year, just trying something different. Just
Oh, yeah, it's not gonna.
I'm
It's gonna
not-
be a sneak out for about 2 hours Saturday evening, and then that's it. Just
Yeah.
sneak in. I got a new Q200.
a little quick set. And
Yep, got to sneak in through the field, and then sneak out through the timber. Got a
What
trail
are you
marked up.
shooting? You shooting doe or just holding off for a mature buck? I think this
probably-
He gets
office.
some-
I think this office
he
is a
gets
little
some-
shy on deer jerky right now.
He gets some single mama doe coming by trying to
Yeah.
snort weed
I don't
or
know. It just kind of depends on how the air catches me that day, I guess.
You want me to go shoot a doe?
We'll see.
I'll be ready.
I love it.
All right.
Well, thanks again, guys.
Yes.
Deer hunting.
Deer. I got the itch. Pat, you've got the itch.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
That's a wrap.
All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, go ahead and give us a subscribe. That way you're going to get a notification every time we put out a new podcast. Chandler, what else should they do?
Go to our social media pages and give us a like on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Get us subscribed to YouTube channel. We do product reviews there. And then giveaways is a great part of our social media as well.
And then we just want to thank you guys for what you guys do and support us so we can do stuff like this. So thank you.